Hello, Internet. Hello, Facebook. Hello, YouTube, Instagram, anywhere else this video may appear. My name is Samuel Huber from SamuelHuber.net. Samuel Huber on YouTube, Samuel Huber on Facebook, Huber Family Adventures on Instagram. This is my show, Heroes of Autism, here with Greg Bennett, and he's going to tell us a bit about his support group that he runs for adults on the spectrum. Greg, tell us a bit about yourself before we dive into that.
Okay. So I'm Greg Bannett, and yeah, I'm 46, although soon to be 47 next week. Um, so I've been diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome it's a little over 10 years ago, almost 11 years ago. So that's 2009. So I guess for me, I was like growing up, I was definitely one of those people that just I don't know, kind of blended into the background a little bit as far as disabilities. I mean, it's the funny thing with I don't know, with just autism. There's just I meet a lot of people that it takes a little while, but I realize they're on the spectrum. But you kind of think about it. I'm probably one of those. And I think for me, my difficulties, I would say my difficulties are really I don't know. I always felt like I was like, decently smart, like not the smartest kid out there. I mean, I like math and geography and things. But yes, I would say like definitely like romantic relationships. Like I'm 47 and I've never like had a relationship or been on a date, although that could change. But yeah, there were just a lot of hidden forces, a little bit just like in junior high that kind of prevented me from really having like the confidence to the kind of confidence to ask somebody out, and yeah, it was a lot of social stuff. I mean, there's just sometimes I'm not too trauma prone, but there was just like some of my friends around me and things kind of like traumatized me into basically kind of put me in my place and not pursuing relationships. So that's definitely kind of one thing. I would also say like employment has always been terrible. Like, and I'm sure you probably talk with different people, here as an autism that kind of, they find their way. And I luckily have, but I do have to say, um, yeah, like I was always very ashamed that I couldn't find work in high school, and everybody else I knew, except for a couple people, like always had jobs like after school. So it was kind of embarrassing. But also when I had work, like after college, and I was fortunate to graduate with like basically an environmental engineering degree. And I worked in engineering for like 11 years, but all those years I was working engineering, I always felt like I just want to pretty much say the dumbest person. Like, I mean, dumbest in the sense of just like I worked really slow, or it just took me longer to understand the work, or I could just never get promoted. That was probably the biggest thing. And I always felt like shame with that. I worked at one place. It was like, a place of like 100 and I don't know, it was like 200, 300 people in the building or however it was. I did feel like the dumbest person there, or if not the dumbest, just like the least qualified for my job. So yeah, it's even though I had like some coworkers that appreciated some of the little things I could do, but I could always tell like on my performance reviews I never promoted, and yeah, so I'm kind of like the hidden person because like nobody notices like that first person that gets laid off from the job or whatever. Even though I had a couple jobs for like 5 years or more. But I tell you, I think there were a lot of things that kind of I should also mention there's a certain like hidden level of isolation too. Because I know isolation. I mean, we have the COVID-19, so isolation is getting more not just from people on the spectrum, but the general population. And you can see how some people are, kind of just bent out of shape. But
Yeah,
yeah, on autism, yeah, but with autism, the way it showed with me is like I had like times in school where I had friendships, and I could kind of carry them over into like my regular life, even at work. It was just hard to maintain and find friendships. Before I got diagnosed 11 years ago, that was just kind of always a struggle, I think. People that I was kind of close with, and yeah, really good friendships. But I think it changed when I got diagnosed and went through therapy for a year and a half. That was really, it just made a lot of the traumas and things you're shameful of, and the understanding, just a lot better. So I just felt a little more confident. And oh, so I know Sam mentioned that I run support groups in the intro. Yeah, so I'm fortunate to run two of them now. Well, maybe it's one too many, but yeah. And when I first went to, so well, I was a member, but back then, but now I'm pretty much running thing, which is this grasp of Greater Philadelphia that meets in Berwyn. When I went there for the first time, yeah, it was really kind of eye-opening. I mean, there were other people a little older than I was, who were
Mhm.
either like laid off. So this was like 2010. If you remember back then, we were kind of, and we were in that recession, like that second year. So I was doing engineering work, and yeah, certain areas of engineering, there were a lot of people that got laid off in that time. But it felt comforting. Like there was another person who was like an architect, and he could relate to me being laid off. And I was actually the first meeting I went to in March of 2010. That was the same week I got laid off from my engineering job, which I had for like 6.5 years. So yes, it was good. I had other people that were just kind of understood that, and then just to keep them going back, every month, mostly every month. Yeah, it just all the hidden things, like like stems or something. Like when someone was telling me that, like I was like, it's just those things you never think about.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, the support groups have helped so much, and I'm glad that there's more of them. There really should be more, though. I mean,
Mhm.
it's like fairly good. I think they have like 15 or something. I don't know how many, like in United States and Canada. And there's other groups too. I was actually on a call with it was this one guy in Washington D.C. He has a group AAGW.
Mhm.
Yeah, Mark Burnkoff, but he got a group of he just like reached out to people, different people on the autism spectrum that run support groups, and I think we had 17 people on the call. This was international, so there were people from like Canada, Iceland, I think Germany, some other places, United States. But yeah, so so we have a few support groups, but I'm telling you, I think there's not enough. I mean, adults just they don't have like first of all, I mean, gag diagnosis and things like that is difficult, and finding people that work with adults uh, on the autism spectrum, of all levels. That's definitely it's just harder to find. So the support groups really kind of help fill in some of the gaps. They're certainly not replacement, but I mean, there were some things in the support group that I could. I mean, my therapist was pretty good. I mean, she was a good therapist. But yeah, there was just some things I couldn't get from her, just from people with a lived experience and everything. So I mean, I've had a few other things that really changed my life, like Buddhism has helped me. I also do yoga and teach, but I think just that peer support, yeah, it's just so important.
Yeah, I think definitely peer support is definitely the biggest thing that as autistic people we often look to neurotypical people that guide us, but we should be really looking to each other because we alone know what it's truly like to experience the autistic experience. Which leads me to my next question for you, Greg. How has your perspective on autism changed over the years, especially since you got diagnosed 11 years ago?
Yeah, that's a very good question because it's changed. I'll tell you what, it's changed quite a bit. When I first got diagnosed, well, actually, even before that, I remember my sister. So I guess the story behind the diagnosis, I didn't even realize this, but um, apparently my sister, like once every year, she would say, "Oh, I know someone who has this thing, Asperger syndrome." Like, she would kind of explain it and like, I think you might have it because like the social difficulties or this, that, or whatever. And I'd just be like, "Oh, whatever." Like I didn't really even know anyone that was on the spectrum. I think with Asperger's, I want to say the only person I ever knew that was on Asperger's up or just knew of, I think was the lead singer from this Australian band called the Vines. And I just remember, I just because I love music, like that's like my big special interest. I just
Mm.
remember I was reading an article and was like, oh, I have Asperger's syndrome and whatever. And yeah, and like so I just never kind of connected it to. And so she made this call for like 3 or 4 years. And I just remember that on my birthday, yeah, in May, which we're coming up to, yeah, in that year, what, 2009, and we had like the same call. And then my sister was just like, just go to a therapist already. And she's just like, come on, what's wrong? It just said that she just lost patience and like hung up, and it's just like,
Mm.
I was like, all right, you know what? It's not like I'm poor. I can afford a diagnosis, luckily. You know, so I went through it, and I found a pretty good therapist in the Philadelphia area, in the Philly area. And yeah, when I got the diagnosis, like I was just kind of like, I didn't know what it meant. Like I was just kind of like, like, what is it? I don't know. I was kind of lost for like a month or something. Actually, it was a little more than that.
Mm.
Because like when you get diagnosed, I mean, you don't know how to explain it to people. Like you try to explain it. Like I explained to my boss, who was actually very supportive at that time. He was just like, what is that? Like I, I didn't know. Even though this is like engineering, like it could be like a fourth of the room probably could diagnose.
Oh yeah, definitely. You probably throw a rock and hit an autistic person in a room like that.
Yeah. So I think like those, I want to say like those first 2 or 3 years, it was like really kind of learning about what it was and meeting people and making some friends, like, from the support group and other places that were on the spectrum, and certainly my therapist. I think, but it really kind of changed my perspective a little. Like, I want to say, oh, just so basically, like I ran my first meeting, I think, like 2013, like 3 years in after diagnosis. And I think it was like another 4 years, 3 or 4 years after that, when I kind of like basically the guy who founded, oh, I might as well mention the names, Bob Hedin. He founded GRASP of Philadelphia, and he was like the third chapter. Like Michael John Carley, who founded GRASP. Uh, he yeah, he was running groups in New York City, and then Bob, found him and helped him start the group, and that was like into yeah, we've actually this is our 15th year, or actually it's our 16th year, but we've been around 15 years. Um,
Very cool, man.
so yeah, when Bob, I mean, he had some medical issues and things, so he wanted to kind of retire. So I kind of took over the group of another facilitator who's not there anymore, but he filled in for yeah, a good 7 years or maybe more. Um, I think it was right at that time when I was kind of a little more in leadership, and I think it was like the first time we did a table or like some kind of like just explain the group to the public,
Hmm.
um, where I kind of like it was almost like the light switch kind of like went on, where I became just like another person on the autism spectrum,
Hmm.
to becoming like an advocate, and I didn't even really know it at the time. I remember maybe even like before, like maybe just a year before that. I just remember seeing like an old picture that Bob had of like a couple other members like at a table they did for University of Pennsylvania or someplace like 5 years before that. I just remember seeing like another member that I was like kind of friendly with, but I just remember like, oh, I can never be that person. Like I can never be behind a table and like
Mm.
yeah, or like put on Facebook like yeah, I remember. There was a time when a friend of mine put like well, it was neurotypical, but she just put like she knows on the spectrum, but just put an article about like Asperger's or autism or something on there. And I was kind of like, oh, don't make this public because
Hmm.
people know. But I think it really just started changing like when I was starting to run more meetings and lead the group, and just to really know that people really need to know that it's just like there's just a lot of people that are just, I mean, I don't like to use the word regular people, but, I mean, more or less. I don't like that because, well, that's another thing that definitely changed. I mean, I think just like we always use that, and I don't like the term anymore, but functioning, like higher functioning, or I definitely don't. I avoid the LOW word, but
Different
I try to
perspective.
go. Yeah, I try to go with ability. I think at least, but there's some people don't like that either. But yeah, kind of just making a little bit more of a equalizer that, everybody has things they can do, things that are challenges, and you try to work with the strengths and the things you can do, and just not get too crippled with yeah all the other stuff. And this is only me. This is always my little vision, but I guess if we ever get there, I think the big thing these days is that we know that there's just not just of autism, but with trauma and all these things that we need like just basic infrastructure, not only just like therapy and peer support and those things, but just society wide. Here's society wide just to help people, to have different conditions. I just
Hmm.
want to use an example because I remember there at a grass meeting. I remember it was after the meeting. Me and this one other facilitator were kind of, we were finished and we ran the meeting. And I remember there was one time where he was kind of I think he was saying something like, we need to help the we run a pretty safe place for the most part. I mean, yeah, sometimes it's challenging, but I remember it was after one meeting where I was thinking, I think he was saying like, we need to help the like kind of integrate the group like into society, or kind of yeah, help people like kind of like that. And I was thinking like, I was thinking the opposite, like with more of like, well, you know what, we actually need society to be more of like what we have in the group, which is like a safe place. People can be themselves. There's no stigma and shame. Like that's what we have to bring out to the rest of the world. I
Mm.
could see
Amen.
kind of where I could kind of see where he's coming from, like, like social skills or, yeah, we have to kind of bring some of that in. But I think it's just more of like, you create the safe place and just kind of give it, find a way where everybody else can kind of understand. And
Hmm.
luckily, I mean, we talked before where we started the interview about some of the people you're interviewing for Autism Heroes. And a lot of those people kind of, yeah, they're really helping with that. Yeah, getting the word out there.
Yeah, and that would show that we come from all walks of life. We're not just, and we all have all different professions, all different interests. That we are actually, in fact, human. Um, that I think
Oh, yeah.
your mission as a public speaker, and my mission is to show the world our humanity, not the diagnosis. And I think running support groups definitely helps not only yourself, but I'm sure other people that come to your support groups, that how human they actually are. That life is this progression of ups and downs, and learning from one experience from the other. Which leads me to my next question. Why is it important for you to be a voice for autistic people, but not only being sorry. Why is it important for you to be a voice, an actual autistic voice, not just some expert who's studied it for 20 years?
Um, okay, that's a good question. I'll think about that a little bit. I think part of it, and I'm still growing and learning, which is always, I mean, I'm very fortunate to be very curious too.
Hmm.
Um, but I think a lot of it is just kind of, well, I mean, I guess my vision, if you have to have, I think we all have like visions of like what we want,
Hmm.
eventually. I think my vision definitely is to just have more leaders that are, on the spectrum that are kind of leading this thing. Like I'll tell you what, before like leading Grasp, the number of things that I've led, I can count it like less than on my hand. It's like two or three things. Like,
Hmm.
so I never thought of myself as like a born leader. I've always kind of thought of myself as, what, I really do think, I think of like mentoring and those kinds of things are really important. And
Hmm.
especially when it comes to autism. I mean, I don't know about you or I don't know about other people, but no one ever mentored me. Like I never had anything resembling a mentor ever. Like, and I'll tell you what, there was a time, my first job, like it was a drafting job out of like college I had for 5 years. There
Hmm.
was one person there, another engineer, well, he was an engineer, he was like kind of just a few years out of school or something, who kind of like offered like, that mentorship. And he gave me like examples. I remember he gave me an example of like, like, I mean, one thing he designed is like pump stations, like when you do civil engineering.
Hmm.
Just saying like, I had another job before this one. They didn't know how to like, they did not know how to design a pump. Like, what's the throughput? What's the, how, the factor of safety, like how many pumps you have in case one breaks down, you have to have, so you compare the other one, that sort of thing. He was just saying like I'll kind of basically he was kind of saying like I'll help you mentor you on this kind of stuff, and I was just so ashamed like that I was saying before, like just behind everybody else, and I couldn't figure things out. I kind of like was like kind of doing on myself. Like I just it's almost like one of those things where I couldn't even accept having a mentor because I just felt like deficient or just like half a person or something. And if I had to, I wish I had like just gave it a second thought or I don't know something. Or even had someone like a parent or I don't know a friend. I sometimes I think like if I had a support group back then, would I change my mind on that? Like maybe I would have been. Um, yeah, so I think really it's kind of I mean yeah, it's just getting and not just the people that are have a little had gone to college and are kind of like on their way. I mean, really, just everybody at every level, and have experience. I mean, it's fortunate to see a lot of different people with different abilities, even people that are nonverbal, or that can, contribute to all this because I think that's just so important. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, and I am a believer of you build a structure. I mean, it's kind of like the engineer in me. I think of like because they always talk about yeah, you build a building or you build industrial plant or whatever you're engineering.
Hmm.
Engineering a social system or like mental health or just systems where people can get a real support system doesn't even necessarily have to cost money. I think if you just have the infrastructure there, um, yeah, then you should be able to just have a better functioning society where everybody has something. I mean, a little bit self determination and some help,
Hmm.
accommodations, whatever's needed, just to get a satisfying life and do something
Hmm.
that they find is interesting or at least part of that life.
Hmm.
Because yeah, that's really kind of I don't even remember what the original question was, but oh
The
yeah, right,
original,
that like why yeah,
why
so
did you
I
become
think for me.
it was the original question is why did you think it why did you become a public speaker? And you answered the question because you wanted to give a voice to because you've actually experienced what it means to be autistic. If you could go, next question is if you could go back in time and talk to a young Greg, what would you tell him?
You know, that's a very good question. There's probably a few things. Yeah, if I could go back in time and tell them, well, you know, the one that, I mean, kind of piggybacking off that previous question a little bit. Well, maybe it isn't quite. Well, oh, so one other thing about it too is that I've definitely learned. There's just a lot of different, like, I almost want to say, there's another thing I've learned in the last few years. I mean, social anxiety and trauma, they are more often the case, the default, than the exception. And I'll tell you, there's there's definitely people that are very vulnerable. I mean, we think about, yeah, unfortunately, inner city, people that are just in poverty conditions and are really struggling. They don't really have many choices.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just to me obvious trauma, you know, environment.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there's like war situations and all the other terrible stuff. People that have been abused, so physical abuse, those kinds of things. So now that's a good segment of the population. But
Mm-hmm.
if you take all the other people, I mean, there's just like just everyday kind of stuff, like stuff you even witnessed. I think that's more of my because I've been. I mean, look, face it, I'm and I try to acknowledge these things fairly privileged. I mean, it was kind of like upper middle class kind of upbringing in suburbs. But even in those kind of settings, there's just it's sometimes it's the stuff you witness. Like I was very fortunate on autism spectrum. I was one of those people that was I didn't get bullied that much, except for like a year, maybe year and a half in like middle school, and quite a few people got bullied. To be quite honest.
Hmm.
But like outside of that, it didn't really affect me. But I witnessed like my best friend get bullied, and it really it was traumatizing. Like seeing like your best friend get, and he wasn't even autism spectrum, but get like beaten up down the hallway, and that kind of I didn't even realize, but that really just it was like I was using I used that metaphor, the light switch, where it
Hmm.
was kind of before then it was kind of on, like I kind of could do what I want. It started to turn off right about then, and that was a lot of the dating stuff that I couldn't handle, and puberty stuff. So I mean, the person, probably the number one thing I would have just said that look, you're in a school. There's just and middle school, they call it junior high back then, but at that level, it's puberty. There's mean people, and at least in my school, like that's how you became kind of popular or got attention. And yeah, and it was just like not even everyone in school wanted to be popular, but still, it was kind of you noticed it, and like I was a pretty good expert at not being bullied and noticing like how people got bullied and what they were looking for and why they picked on you and all that stuff.
Hmm.
I was able to avoid it, but like I couldn't do anything for like my best friend who got, and yeah, so I probably would have said something to me. I probably have said something along the lines of like, you know, um, well, trauma. I probably would have done something. They didn't have trauma informed care back then.
No.
I probably would have, yeah, I probably would have said, look, you saw something that was, pretty traumatic. I might have sent myself to, or, I might have talked to my dad and say, I think I need to see a therapist because
Hmm.
I can see like I have like certain dysfunctional sexual patterns and things that honestly are probably not that abnormal for someone that's in puberty and at that age. But there was something there, and it's kind of bullied a little bit too by other people.
Hmm.
So I could have talked it out and kind of worked it out, and maybe yeah, I mean it. Well, I didn't want to go too far because I could talk a little more about that. But yeah, I mean it's still difficult, and I'll tell you what, autism or just humanity. This is just everybody has these things. Just about everybody. They might be very mild in some people, and people don't know this stuff. I mean, I've studied yoga. I mean, I have a lot of hats. One of them being a yoga teacher. Although I'm taking a little time off now with the
Hmm.
COVID-19 uh, crisis, but yeah, and so we know about karma and the imprints and subconscious imprints, and this is what happens to everybody. Whether
Hmm.
you believe like reincarnation from previous lives, just look at your own life. uh, there's stuff there, and
Hmm.
people, I mean, it's really sad when you see like people I mean, I'm 46, going to be 47, but when you see people like 60, 70, 80, and they're still living with this stuff, it's really sad. And
Hmm.
yeah, so the trauma informed care for sure. And yeah, another thing I'd also say, the school I particularly was in was like kind of an upper crust school. I came from a middle class school into an upper crust school, and I don't have a lot of vendettas or gripes on people, and I'm a forgiveness type person, but again, it's like deep down inside me, there's some resentment of the snobbery and the just like you have to have like the yeah, the Mercedes, or the status and all that stuff, and
Hmm.
just having real resentment on it, and kind of
Right.
like accepting like that's where those people are,
Hmm.
and just letting go is such.
Such a powerful tool.
And that's what I would have. Yeah, that's definitely what I told that 14-year-old Greg. Yeah.
All right. Greg, I'm gonna end our interview with the following question: If you could change any, if you change one thing about how the world sees autism, what would that be and why?
Um, that's a good question. Well, it's one thing. Well, I mean, mean, the big thing is that we're people, just like everybody else, and that we want a lot of the same things. But yeah, I mean, well, kind of acceptance. We don't want to be, isolated and bullied and all those sort of things. But also, I think, yeah, my one coworker. I didn't even mention this, but I do have. I am fortunate to be in one of the first. I think it is the first autism peer specialist program, certainly in the United States. So there's like five of us that work there, and it was one of my coworkers was just saying that you know we are human, but like our brains are just we're just neurolog. I mean, they're just wired differently. They just operate differently,
Mm.
and so a lot of times, um, and it's in quite it's and like but each person on the autism spectrum is still different. So like even if you're dealing with multiple people, Um, like for example, some people have all sorts of different sensory sensitivities,
Hmm.
which could include yeah, the five senses, but they include the kind of the like the over empathy or just other things. Yeah, we are generally kind of just more sensitive, so that can cause more social anxiety, even compared to the general population. Even though I was saying it is the default
Hmm.
social anxiety, especially in women, as I've learned. Um, but yeah, so I think I really, with everybody, with autism in particular, really kind of get to know the person and just kind of treat them at their level. Albeit that can be difficult, even I work as a peer specialist with people on the autism spectrum. There's still people I've been seeing for months, and I still don't quite understand how they operate. But I think really patience and yeah, and what's the other word? Patience definitely, and yeah, just kind of being willing to adapt and yeah, just get to understand somebody and just work with them instead of yeah, I've seen so many people placed in boxes over the years. And
Hmm.
here's another example. Wait, so your question was, oh, the tell. Well, so I can't keep. I'm sorry, I can't give you just one. I will tell you what. There are people in power, all sorts of power, that are on the autism spectrum,
Hmm.
and they don't even know it. They're old. It's like basically if they got a diagnosis, it's kind of like worthless to them. What are they going to do? Go to therapy? They're 70 or whatever. I
Hmm.
had so many people at work. When I think about it, it's incredible. When I look back and like, oh my God, this person was totally on the autism spectrum. They were so inflexible. Their voice was very it was just one tone the whole time. Vocabulary. I had someone at my old engineering job. This was a guy that was well liked by our customer, and he got work in and stuff. But boy, was this guy ever on the autism spectrum. He just talked in one specific like technology lingo language and used it for everybody. And he kind of showed it off a little bit too. Like I know these terms, but he just totally acts in this like I know this language. It's what I use. You don't know this? What's wrong? It's like kind of like
Yeah.
they ask a question or whatever. Like yeah, it's and multiply this by I don't know, 1,000, whatever. Everybody's workplace. You probably have a manager like this. Like if you work in a building with like 50 people or whatever. So it's just yeah, it's normalized. People
Yeah,
kind of
we're
accept it.
basically we're everywhere.
Yeah, I've seen people every profession, literally every profession. We had a personal support group. She was a professional mediator. Like that's not something you think of as like oh they're on the autism spectrum. That's
Hmm.
a lot of training, social skills, you know, a lot of talents. You don't think that person could be on the spectrum, but no, they're every profession.
That's great, Greg. Thank you so much for coming on my show. If someone wants to hire you to come public speak, or someone wants to come to your support group, how can they get in contact with you?
Oh well, so Grasp of Philadelphia is one of the support groups I run. So we do have a Facebook group. I'm pretty sure it's like Facebook slash I think Grasp under dash Philly. Uh, yeah, so the other support group I run is ASPEration. Oh, so yeah, so Grasp of Philadelphia is actually it's on the main line in Berwyn. ASPEration, we are in Center City, Philadelphia, so it's good we can get people in the city. That one, we have a meetup group, so it's meetup.com, and it's slash aspiration Philly, and I'll spell that out. So aspiration is spelled ASPERATION, Philly. And so it's like Asper, but aspiration that way instead of a And yeah, and I think if you Google, if you want to find the CAPS program, which is so CAPS, which is my job, which is kind of part time. It's like could be full time at some point. So that's the Autism Peer Specialist program, and it's for people in Philadelphia. I think if you just Google CAPS, CAPS, like Philadelphia and autism, you'll find it.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, that program's been around for, I think it's about 8 months. It's going pretty well so far. Cross your fingers.
Yeah, I heard about CAPS. It looks like a really good program. All right, Greg, I'm gonna let you go. Thank you so much for coming on my show. All right, everyone, this is Sam Heber signing off.
Okay.
Bye.